Okay, I'd like to get started. Thank you for joining us this morning yet. If everybody can still see am I sharing? Okay, everybody should be able to still see the slides. Okay, episode 5, assessing quality. Interesting and important topic under WIOA. Today we're going to talk a little bit about why we assess for quality, how quality is going to be assessed, and how it's currently been assessed, maybe some additions under WIOA and what those changes might look like, and also a little bit discussion about transition monitoring. What that entails as we move from WIA into WIOA, and things that we can look for with that. Before we start, I'm recording, and we'll also post that on the site that I shared earlier. It's under Laws, Policies, and State Plan. Scroll down to the end of that, and you have a section on WIOA. And I think that we should have most of, if not all, the recordings from the previous sessions and the slides associated with that. And this will be posted there within a couple days as well. Most people, when asked why we assess for quality, will go on to say that, well, because we have to. And you're right, in some extent. It is a federal requirement. It is also a state requirement under WIOA, and I've tried to include sections of the law as we go through it as a resource that if you want to look it up and read more about it, you can. But monitoring and evaluation for the quality and improvement is a federal requirement. It's important to note that included in that is the purpose of disseminating information about models and proven promising practices within the state. I think that helps to really set the tone for assessing for quality. And I've tried as we've gone out for site visits and even on the phone with our desktop visits. It's not an I got you type occurrence. And I know that there's anxiety associated with that. But it really is an opportunity, and as we go through that, I hope that each process or piece of assessment, you see the value of how this can feed back into your program as an element of continuous quality improvement. It's also a state requirement and has been spelled out and explained in the Unified State Plan. So in Title II, there's a specific portion of the plan, and a question is very targeted and has been included in here about describing exactly the assessment and the quality and how that assessment will look as it's performed under WIOA. So with the State Unified Plan, Department of Education was very purposeful in asking this question and wanted a full description of how the state plans to assess the quality of the local programs. But as I hinted to, also there's other reasons for assessing for quality. Obviously, the accountability element, both program and fiscal, as far as making sure that programs are compliant, using the funds appropriately, and meeting the performance benchmarks. But there's opportunity there too for correction and continuous improvement and looking at positive changes. And most importantly, or at least not to be forgotten, is the opportunity for recognition, to highlight those best practices, to be able to applaud a program's initiative, to applaud their innovation with applying the principles of adult education and putting it into practice and seeing how that program has made things grow. So I hope that that doesn't get lost in the whole technical aspect of assessing for quality, but that it's an opportunity to share those practices that we would like to highlight and share with other programs. So how do we go about assessing for quality? I think that as we go through this, you'll recognize that these things have been in place. So these things are part of the practice. And we're very fortunate to have some of these things already happening. So there's several strategies that are being used. Primarily, and I guess most recently, maybe is a professional development strategies associated with my learning plan. I know that with the administrative rules that have been put in place that require the individual professional development plan of full-time, part-time instructors, that trying to track that and trying to keep that managed and accountable for without having a web base or a tool that the state can just go in and say, yes, this program has 60% of their staff with a plan. This program has 100%. That would be an additional burden that would then have to be shared or reported on in other mechanisms. So having that in the system allows for easy reporting, easy tracking of that, both for the local program, but also for the state to know that the hours of professional development are being met, to also know that classroom observation, not for performance review, but absolutely for feedback and for the opportunity of seeing how the professional development is being incorporated into the classroom. All of that is tracked. Good question from Marcel, and I think that Marcella mentioned that a little bit at the face-to-face. I'm really pushing because we've been paying for that other side of the MLP for a while now. It's called OASIS, and that's the feedback loop to close that professional development circle, if you will, so that when you're seeing and observing what's happening in the classroom, you're identifying also, well, what PD needs are there? And if I'm seeing this in several instructors, is that a larger need? Is that something that the local program needs to address? And then two, as a state sees that, is that a state need then for professional development? I heard that December was as soon as that she could free up her schedule to start that training. But if we have that need, I would certainly reach out. She asked, I believe, and might correct me if I'm wrong, that she asked if there was any early implementers that was interested in that training to reach out to her. Okay. We also talk about program status updates, how we review the application, action plans, monthly performance review. We have, fortunately, the opportunity of sharing enrollment targets and how the state's doing, how the local programs are doing. And also recently, last year, we started sharing where we were at with our HiSED awards. We do a quarterly financial reviews, and as we talk about that a little bit more, I hope to emphasize how important that piece of it is, how much that saves future audits and things like that from needing to be done by doing those quarterly financial reviews. Site and desktop monitoring. And added to this is a one-stop certification. 3 elements of that, and we'll talk a little bit more as we get to that slide. But as part of the one-stop system, each adult education site, each adult education program as a whole is part of that system. So as you look at your role in that system, you'll be asked to be just as accountable, even if you're not co-located, in the evaluation of effectiveness as you're serving that system, your program and physical accessibility under WIOA and ADA requirements, and also your continuous improvement with that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that one-stop certification and the proposed memo that is being drafted. Let's just go back to each one of these elements of assessment is rooted in WIOA requirements. So again, I tried to share the section of the law that relates to that. So you'll see within the law that there are several references to high-quality professional development programs to improve the instruction. And we feel that both as we've implemented professional development standards, instructor standards, having the content standards defined for us, that all of these are leading to the establishment of high-quality professional development. We know where we need to move the needle to. The target, although it might seem really difficult to hit, is a little bit clearer on where we need to aim at. So again, through the platform of My Learning Plan, we do have the ability to watch for what is being registered, what the plans are, and the feedback even for the training that's attended, so that we know, hey, did this meet their need as defined in their plan? Are further trainings required to address that need? How was the training as a whole? And what adjustments do we need to make that better? And then as I talked a little bit about the individual classroom observation. And I really hope that we look at implementing that and looking for ways that we can move towards including that as a tool in My Learning Plan. So I hope that there's interest in reaching out, because that, again, closes the loop on professional development. It's so very hard to know that professional development meant something if we don't see it in practice. And I know that it's happening. I know that as instructors are coming and receiving training on STAR, they're receiving training on how to use and unpack college and career readiness standards. I know that they're taking it back to the classroom. But what I don't know is, what do they need next? What are they finding to be stumbling blocks in their application? So that feedback is very critical. Again, as we look at other elements of assessing program status updates, it's looking and demonstrating the alignment between proposed activities and services and the strategy and goals of the local plan. So you're looking and reporting back on what did you actually do to the strategies that you said that you would do 6 months previously or 9 months previously. We know that things change, that circumstances kind of dictate adjustments to those, what we thought we would do and the strategies that we set to what was demonstrated and what was actually done. So again, we're anticipating that after the competition, there would still be an element of status updates being required, reporting back on those strategies and addressing further goals and performance areas that are needed for continuous improvement. It's an opportunity to reset those goals and to look at, well, we didn't hit that 50% addition target that we had, but we hit 20%, so our new goal is 35%. It allows us to document the evidence of our progress. It allows us to show that elements, both in qualitative and quantitative examples of moving forward, is there. Again, that relates to the improvement strategies. Anything that is not 90% achieved would require a plan on how and what actions are we going to take to move that further forward. So again, not something that we're unfamiliar with status updates, something that will be continued with the competition. But with the competition, you also don't have the need to continue applications. So with this, there would just be status updates that would be rolled over from what you originally had put in that application to cover that 3-year period, and annually you would do a status update to show, okay, when we started the competition, we'd say we do this. 1 year into that competition, this is what we've been able to do, and this is the documented evidence of that performance. Questions? Am I missing anything in the chat? Okay. I already talked a little bit about the ability that the department has through TE to be able to pull performance review. It helps us to know that the data elements are being reviewed for validity, that we are on track with reporting our monthly attendance, that participants are being entered correctly for their education levels, that we're exiting students from the program. Again, granted, we're moving from WIOA requirements for exiting and moving into WIOA and introducing periods of participation. But this monthly performance review, pulling the data at the 15th of the month to make sure that programs know where they're at least in the areas of NRS enrollment, so that you know, okay, we set this target for enrollment, those that we would retain at least to the minimum. It also, and I hope that programs are taking that opportunity on a monthly basis to also look at their educational levels, where they're at with post-testing and their percentage of post-testing, where they're at with those gains at each of those EFLs, that they're reviewing, okay, we struggled last year in this EFL, where are we at this year with that? And at this time of the year, where are we at with that? How many do we have enrolled in that EFL? And how many of those were post-tested or even eligible for post-testing? And how close are they to that mark? And if they didn't pass that post-test, what are they doing now? Where are they at in the program? And where would be an appropriate time for the next step? Marcel's offering a comparison spreadsheet, which I think is a great tool. I think that the ability to look at that on a year-to-year basis, and just, I mean, there's not a lot that you can do to maybe adjust that, but there are opportunities that we have to see where we are at, and to to know where we should be aiming towards. I think that's great. I've heard of other programs that do that, to go back and say, okay, at this time last year and this month, this is how many we had enrolled, and this is how many we had received diploma awards. Okay, quarterly financial review. This is different than the fiscal report, which is due this Friday, which I hope everyone is having great luck at and finding success and pulling those together. And this is the claim process that through Iowa grants we have we have the ability to receive the reimbursement amount and the details of that. Recently, I had an opportunity to talk to a couple other state directors on this process, and they were very envious of the ability that we do this on a quarterly basis and that we do this continually with programs, just because they send on an annual basis a financial audit group out to each program to dig through a year's worth or a year and a half's worth of receipts, claims, to look for what we do on a quarterly basis, what was allowable, what was allocable for the use of AFLA funds. They spend a week at the programs doing this. And I know that would not be a fun experience. And I really am appreciative, maybe appreciative even more, of the system of Iowa grants, that we have that and we are able to negotiate back if there's any questions about what's being requested for reimbursement, that we can require additional documentation, or that we can as Mike highlighted in the new coordinator training, that we can have clear definitions or clearer indicators of where in that general ledger funds were expended. I know that we received some documentation that is in excess of 100 pages, which makes finding a particular line item a little bit difficult. But even so, it is a review process, and it collects that documentation for that claim in one spot. And that makes you and makes the requirement of being fiscally accountable a little easier to manage and a little less on your plate. I certainly don't think that any program would look for an opportunity to host a financial audit group for a week that's digging through the adult education claims and processes. So I hope that that makes sense, that we do the quarterly and that we do it through Iowa grants. Okay, site and desktop monitoring. Again, it goes back to the monitoring and evaluation of the quality of and the improvement in the adult education and literacy activities. So it's looking at what are the activities that this program is providing, what is their level of quality, and where are they improving at. As you know, those that were able to attend the face-to-face meeting last week, that we're in the process of reviewing and updating, well, developing really program standards that will help with the quality assurance process, that we're looking at the learner experience, the instructor, the program leader and design elements that will go into it. We believe that through program standards, a program will know how to make those continuous improvement adjustments, and that any monitoring tool should be based on the foundation of standards. And with that monitoring tool will also come a risk assessment to help identify both on a personal use as a self-assessment tool, but also used annually by the state to evaluate those variables that relate to the need for additional site visits. When I've reviewed and looked at several other states' evaluation and monitoring tools, they all make a point of saying that just because you have a site doesn't mean that your program's bad. I don't know how to get away from that mindset, and I don't know how convincing that is. But really, with a risk assessment and with the monitoring and site visits, those relate back to the opportunity for correction and for the opportunity to grow. Several times we have changes in leadership that might trigger a need for a visit or for opportunities to discuss technical assistance with a program and to identify, well, how can we support you in this transition and this role? So not intended. And when we had our federal visit, again, triggered by recent change in staff, I was again assured that it wasn't about our program quality. I don't know if I believe that. Just in the same role as you would be for a site visit. But it is good discussion that can be had, good clarification that can be had, and also, as in all cases, an opportunity to look at and applaud those things that are our best practices. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. One-stop credentialing, section 121G of WIOA. So this is an element that is in Title I. However, because, again, one-stop is a system design, not a program, it involves all the core partners. And as such, it helps to establish through the credentialing process a minimum level of quality and a level of consistency of services in the one-stop centers across the state. Now, It's important to note that credentialing is not limited to just the comprehensive site. In several states, and I'm encouraging the definition to be clearer on this, that this needs to either include or not include the affiliate sites, those in which one or two or more of the required partners are associated with or providing services through, so that we're aware of what the need for credentialing is. And there are three areas where through the network of employment and related services, we're looking to be measured in, and that's effectiveness. Effectiveness has a lot to do with customer feedback, customer services, physical and programmatic accessibility. So whether or not our programs, and this isn't just related to ADA and WIOA, it's accessible to all, and making sure that the programs are designed to serve those that we have a need for. And especially with WIOA's focus on improving access to those with barriers to employment, have we made those changes and adjustments necessary in our program to make sure that we're serving those that are hardest to serve? And again, looking at continuous improvement. So with one-stop credentialing, we are looking at this being joint guidance from the state core partner group. We're looking at and reviewing a memo now as we speak, but we're also looking at standards associated with a one-stop, what those standards would relate to, and how that credentialing would appear. Again, it shouldn't be a guess as what are we looking at for effectiveness. It shouldn't be a guess as what are we looking for program accessibility or continuous improvement. So having the foundation of a standard, again, is something that I'm really encouraging our core partners to look at, so that programs as a whole can, among their core partners, perform a self-assessment, use that tool to look and measure where they're at. Elements of our program standards should certainly be included in that one-stop credentialing. Elements of VR's program standards should be included in that one-stop credentialing. It's a matter of blending those effectively into those areas of effectiveness. Innovation, customer service, how is that being done? With the understanding that each provider, each program is going to approach it a little bit differently, a little bit, well, especially, I mean, with adult education, with the education side of that, our approach is going to be a little bit different than case management. Okay. So as we are in a flux with not having a competition yet, as we are moving from WIA to WIOA, and as we're looking at expanding the adult education and literacy activities that can be funded under WIOA, we are looking at using a monitoring or an implementation review tool to help programs assess where they're at in the movement towards WIOA, to identify areas that are at risk, places where, and again, with WIOA, there comes a lot of the measurements of collaboration. You'll see, and you probably have looked through the implementation review tool already, that 3 of those 4 areas relate to how we're partnering with our core partners, how our relationship with our Workforce Development Board is. So it's really where are we struggling at in those areas, and where can we provide technical assistance that will strengthen those areas that we might be struggling with, and where can we again highlight innovation and best practices where it's being successful here, and if possible, we can replicate it in other areas, so that all programs can be lifted together in their process of implementing WIOA. So as noted, or as I forgot to note in the previous slide, it's broken into 4 different key focus areas as far as WIOA implementation and what we're looking at. The first focus area is governance. So it's the design and governance principles that help to improve that wraparound service of the system. And within the focus area there are 4 core components that we're looking at within that. I think I heard maybe a question. I don't see anything in the chat yet. But if you have a question as we're going through this, don't hesitate to ask. Okay, so if you're looking at the tool, if you've had a chance to pull it up, you'll be able to see that Section 1 really takes a deeper dive into your relationship with the Regional Workforce Development Board. We have asked and do ask about your association, about your involvement with them, but this takes it to another level to really dive in and say, well, do you know their policies on conflict of interest? Has that been made clear to you? Are you involved in their policy or their decision associated with how they're going to RFP or sole source the one-stop operator decision? Is there evidence or involvement or selection process for the chair of that? Do you know that that's business-led and that it comes from the business representatives? So it takes that expectation of your association with the Workforce Development Board to a deeper level. Oftentimes we can be peripherally aware of their involvement or their decisions, but to be truly engaged, we need to know more and we need to be involved more. So it's asking if there's a standing committee, and if so, how is that? What is that focus? Who's leading that? So and maybe it helps to prompt some additional thoughts or questions as you're beginning or continuing your association with that Workforce Development Board. The MOU is, again, an opportunity to highlight some discussion points with your alignment between your local plan and your agreement. Who you've entered into that MOU with. Did it include all the required partners, or did it just include the core partners? And of the required partners, who's at the table? Who have you had the opportunity to engage these discussions with? Have you also, and I know that several programs, and we have the state in general, has talked about the infrastructure and cost share. And we've had meetings just this week about that as well, and plan to have some guidance out there about maintaining a level of status quo with our co-located facilities. But we're also looking at ways that we can model how cost sharing can happen when we're looking at statewide training opportunities for our core partners and our individuals within our program. So it's looking at, is there a design, or is there a practice, or is there an agreement, even if it's provisionally, for determining each partner's agency share of cost. So even if some of those discussions haven't been formalized, is there an opportunity there for discussions to happen? And I think that during the face-to-face, I mentioned that, you know, there's elements of cost sharing already happening. It was demonstrated during that meeting when examples of, well, we have the computers, they have the laptop cart. So together we make it work. They have the facility and we have the instructor, and they're not charging us for the facility and we're not making them pay for the instructor, so together we're making that work. So again, you have the opportunity of tracking that cost sharing. Monitoring and oversight is related to, is there a policy in place within your own program and with your activities to monitor that, to look at how effective those activities are. So if you're looking at engaging in integrated education and training services, is there a monitoring piece of that that you're looking at? Well, as students are concurrently and contextually receiving these combined services, how do we know that this is effective? How do we know that this is working? How do we know that this is of sufficient intensity and rigor within this activity? Is there any elements of monitoring that a program is looking at for their activities? And then we get into sector strategies and industry partnerships. So it talks about your relationship and your awareness of what those sector strategies within your region are and how those are being built out. So it's looking at taking, well, yes, I know they're sector strategies, but I couldn't tell you what they are, who they are, or how it's being funded. This takes it a little bit further into it. Okay. Again, as I've hinted, that 3 of the 4 focus areas are solely related to your relationship with your partners. So this is broken into what challenges, what opportunities were given to you for being able to partner with your core partners. How was the planning experience? What was that like? What strategies are being used to work towards the goal? And both, what steps are being taken to review as a core partner group, both the facilities, the physical, and the program accessibility. So those are discussions that even without having clear and concrete one-stop credentialing guidance, you know that these are elements that are going to be part of it. So what discussions have you had about that? Okay. Any questions as we continue to go through this? Don't hesitate to throw. Good question, Darla. And certainly as we further define that one-stop credentialing, or and how that's going to be rolled out, there might come an opportunity where it'll be monitoring for all core partners. Currently, I'm moving under the direction that we need to have a monitoring tool and a risk assessment of our own. But I am very open to the discussion that a monitoring that could be comprehensive enough could be in the cards. There is even discussion about what it would look like if we contracted with someone outside to do that monitoring, and what would that look like and what would that entail. So there are discussions around that, but as I've indicated, we still have and defined a site desktop monitoring and a one-stop credentialing. Until further decisions are made of if those two become combined, we're looking at having those as separate systems for now for assessing quality. Good question. So Focus 3 really looks at the one-stop operations. It takes a look at those services that are being provided. Again, it's going into that service agreement where you're at with who's providing career services, who's providing access to training services, how the referral process is functioning, how sharing of services between different locations is happening, if there's an orientation process, if staff are able to be at the one-stop comprehensive site, or if a reciprocal agreement where Title I staff is able to be at adult education services sites to be able to provide information. What is that deeper level of making effective referrals looking like to have effective regional plans in place? And also if there's any staff training that is being addressed so that there's cross-training between the core partners happening. So it's looking at those services. Section 4 is solely dedicated to the areas of adult education and literacy activities. It's taking apart the 8 activities that we're allowed to perform with WIOA funds. And it's looking at the quality. It's asking questions about, is this an activity that you provide? And if so, how are you providing it? How are you identifying this as a need? What is your measurement for making sure that the curriculum and instruction is aligned to college and career readiness standards? Making sure that if you're providing workplace education, and that workplace readiness education, that's aligned to 21st century skills. What is your method of measuring that? If you're doing integrated education and training, how are you determining those participants to be signed up for that program? Both in integrated English language and civics education as a service and as a program funded through 241, how are you determining which one that you register for a participant from? How are you determining how you're drawing down funds? Which one of those services and how you're packaging the IET component of that? So it's looking and helping maybe to guide some discussion or some opportunities for review on those activities that you might select in your competition, to further refine and say, you know, based upon need, and this is a need, and this is how we demonstrate that need, and this is how we would make a referral to this activity of our participants. Those are opportunities to look at implementation of WIOA, things that would be included in the review, but also things that should be discussed as you're getting ready for the competition and looking at that. Can you believe that those are all the methods, the many, many methods of assessing for quality? I think that programs have done really well. I've heard horror stories of states that didn't assess for quality and are struggling with this component just because it's quite a method to get into place. I appreciate all the efforts previously where we had established a pattern of desktop and site visits. I believe that we've come a little bit further in what's expected from those. That we actually are establishing foundation, that these are based on standards, and there should be no surprises as what it is that we're looking for or expect to see from programs in determining the quality of those programs. Any questions? Have I bored you to tears with that?
Alex, this is Darla. I have a question.
Okay.
What if we write our grant and we decide, for instance, we're not going to write for family literacy? Mm-hmm. And then within the 3-year period, we have an opportunity to work with someone and get into family literacy. Is that no longer an option because we didn't write that into the original grant, or is that something we could put into the status later?
I'm really hoping that that's something that can be added to the status update. I understand that demographics and our relationships, and you make a good point. Maybe it is something that's going on, but we just haven't partnered with them yet. But during those 3 years, we become aware of that service, and we want to help. We want to help it grow, and there's a growing need for it. I really hope that we are actively engaging in allowing our status updates to be flexible enough to indicate those additional activities. That's where my mind is, that you'd be able to add those, and I want to see that and support programs in adding that. So I hope that answers your question. That yes, that's where I'm at with being able to add it to status updates.
Yes, thank you.
April, I don't do math problems. Other questions? Well, I can't believe that I did that good of a job on describing assessing quality. So I'm sure that you'll have questions, or you'll go back and you'll review this, and other questions will pop up and things like that. Especially as we're still looking at implementing what that one-stop credentialing is going to look like. And the excellent question Darla asked earlier about will that then become monitoring for all? Are we still going to have those separations out? Are good things that I don't have absolute concrete answers on. It is something, even as we've talked about the infrastructure costs, that the period of implementation for WIOA is a sliding scale of things. I didn't mention this, but Tuesday at the face-to-face coordinator meeting, I got a memo from the Fed saying that a window of opportunity for delaying the competition is available if programs are not able to have all the elements necessary for a local plan to do alignment, and local boards that are compliant with WIOA. That through that waiver, a state might delay the competition and not have that in place by July 1st of 2017. So even among the feds, there's a sliding and a need that we want to have, that when we're implementing WIOA, we're doing it effectively. And we're not just doing it to be compliant, but that we are truly looking at this as a systemic change, and that the motivation for that is the collaboration that we're experiencing with our partners. So I hope that as we move forward, that will be a goal, and that we're not just throwing things at you to do things, and that it's purposeful, that there's design behind that. So last call for questions, and then I'll stop the recording.